If you're a shorter guy, you know, find a way to rock that in your favor. There are things that you can do. So if you don't like your nose now and you're in your 20s and 30s, chances are that sucker's gonna grow.
All right.
Julian here from Jawline Theory. All right, this video is a little different. Now, this isn't necessarily a looks maxing channel, but let's be frank, we're talking about bodybuilding, we're talking about men's physiques, we're talking about aesthetics, etc., especially for us guys who are a little older and who may not fit the typical norm or standard. Basically, we may not be Chads. I know some of you subscribers are of various ethnicities, so I appreciate the support. And by the way, subscribe. But I want to talk a little bit about what it was like growing up in Canada in the late 80s, early 90s, and being exposed to a lot of media where guys didn't really look like me, if you know what I mean, right? So what does that mean? Well, black dudes in Hollywood, oh, it's raining, would typically play roles where we would be thugs, you know, criminals, that type of stuff. This was what we were playing in a lot of media, whether it's a sitcom or movie. But things gradually change. Obviously, nowadays, things have come full circle. I remember peak Denzel in the 90s, and what a breath of fresh air it was to see this good-looking dude, you know, no homo, on screen, doing his thing, and just shining. You know, Denzel was really the guy who set the tone for us darker skinned dudes, you know, because in the 80s and 90s, if some of you were around during that time, the thing back then was light skinned guys, right? The ladies were freaking over light skinned guys. Cool. I love my light skinned brothers, no shade, right? But a guy like me, dark skin, you know, in his teens, that wasn't really the thing that resonated with me in terms of being desired by members of the opposite sex. So when Denzel came around, it was like cool to see this brother just do his thing. And man, you know, Hollywood loved him. I'm talking about peak Denzel. I'm talking like in the 90s. I remember when it really struck me was this movie Denzel had done with John Goodman. For those of you who don't know who John Goodman is, if you remember Roseanne, the husband, he played Dan, the husband. Well, John Goodman is Dan. So John Goodman, Denzel, they're in this movie. I think it was some kind of like mystery thriller. They were both detectives. That to me was like peak Denzel. He had his attire on. He had the hair on. I noticed that Denzel looks very different depending on the hairstyle he was rocking at that time. And this only happened sort of like much later, where I saw this movie again like 20 years later. I think I saw it maybe 4 years ago. And it really struck me. I said, you know what? Denzel was the GOAT. He was. You know, in that movie, he was just so suave, so slick. You could tell he was in his element. The way he played his character, the way he delivered his lines, he just had that look, you know what I mean? Now, when I was younger, I didn't really pick up on it. But now that I'm older, and I've since rewatched that movie, I can say, yeah, dude had it, you know? There are some scenes, I remember there's one scene in particular. I think he was in the precinct, and he was delivering some lines. He had some back and forth going between him and his partner, John Goodman. And the way he looked, I was like, bro was smooth as he really was. He just exuded so much confidence. He was probably in some of the best shape he was ever in during that time. And he just looked amazing. So seeing that as a young boy, you know, teenage boy, where role models weren't really dudes that looked like me, that was truly inspiring, you know? I don't remember what year that movie had come out, but nonetheless, I do remember it. And Denzel was the standard for us dark-skinned guys, you know? You had a few other dudes too, to be fair, like Morris Chestnut. You know, Morris Chestnut had a totally different look. But I noticed with darker skinned guys, it always had to be about being athletic. Like, you couldn't be an average dark skinned dude with a regular body. No, you had to have this athleticism tethered to you. So Morris Chestnut, peak Denzel Washington. You had a few other guys. Cuba Gooding Jr. Yeah, I kind of put him in that category. There are a few others that I'm forgetting right now, obviously. If you guys know of any others, you can leave a comment down below. But for the most part, you didn't really see too many dark-skinned guys on screen playing that leading man role, like a positive role model. I remember in my mid-20s, I had gotten into the acting thing. I had an agent. I was flying out or driving out specifically to Toronto and auditioning for roles. One of the first things my casting or agent told me was, I can get you roles, I can book you gigs, but I don't want the attitude. I don't want you to complain. And I said, I'm not going to complain. I said, why would I complain? And to which she answered, well, because most of the roles I'm going to cast you in are going to be thugs and gangsters and, that kind of vibe, you know what I mean? And obviously, this was like late 90s, early 2000s. I kind of understood what she meant because those are the roles we were being casted in. This was during the, early 2000s. You had like guys like Ja Rule pairing up with, was it Steven Seagal and some other guy? I mean, yeah, the DMX, that kind of stuff. And so those were the roles we were playing. Goons, you know what I mean?
All right.
And so it just goes to show you that that's where the industry was some 25 years ago. Things have changed now, things are different. We have a lot of Nigerians coming into the scenes. They're doing really well. We have guys like Idris Elbaz and a few other guys. I don't really know their names, but, they're representing the dark-skinned dudes in a more positive light. And obviously the industry has shifted, whether that's due to wokeness or just self-awareness, and no longer are we willing to play those roles. So things have definitely improved, but that's how it was back in the day, you know what I mean? All right, so at the risk of going on a tangent, I also wanted to address the issue with featureism, especially for dark-skinned guys, Like, this channel is not dedicated to dark-skinned guys. You can be white, black, Asian, you can follow me, it's all good, because we all have our own sort of things that we wrestle with in our communities. But for the brothers out there, especially the dark-skinned guys, I know a lot of us complain about our noses. What's going on with that, man? Embrace your nose, man. I got a big nose and I love it, man. My nose is big, it's strong. I mean, look at me, man. Would I make sense with a thin little nose like this? It would throw off the whole vibe, I have a big head, a big jaw, big lips, big cheekbones, so therefore I have a big nose, and that's absolutely cool. I see a lot of y'all trying to look smacks and trying to reduce the size of your nose, whether you're going under the knife or some other method, and frankly, that's all good. Like, that's your prerogative. But there is a thing with dudes with larger noses. If you can pull it off, you can pull it off. I think I'm able to pull it off. That has a lot to do with, first of all, your nose changes shape as you age, right? If you look at people in their youth, in their teens, in their 20s, in their 30s, the nose will have a certain shape to it. And as you approach your 40s and 50s, well, the cartilage actually starts changing and it widens and it droops. Especially if you're white, the nose might droop downwards and the nostrils might flare out a little more. This is indicative of age, depending on the elasticity found in your nostrils, on the bridge of your nose, that bulbous tip. All that just changes, you know what I mean? Unlike the ears, they kind of remain fixed in size throughout most of your life, For instance, I remember my mom, she was in a nursing home and she had a roommate of hers, this old woman, super white hair. She was probably in her 70s or 80s, and her nose was massive, you know what I mean? But I remember seeing a photo of that woman when she was younger, and her nose was significantly smaller. So that just shows you that with time, with age, the nose tends to flare out. So if you don't like your nose now and you're in your 20s and 30s, chances are that sucker's gonna grow. All right? But again, to come back to this, I think that depending on your look, you can actually rock that feature, you know what I mean? I noticed that since I've gone gray, specifically around my chin, my beard, it has offered a whole new level of appeal to the opposite sex, And I think that has a lot to do with just looking like a rougher kind of dude. The whole big nose, big dude, 6 feet tall. I'm definitely not what you would call refined. I'm rough around the edges. I have this big scar on my lip, something that I had gotten when I was 13 years old. And so, yeah, definitely, I have a few acne scars and this and that, and that's just who I am right now, and that's cool. You know, I'm no longer that soft-looking dude when I was in my 20s. But I also think that some women can appreciate that look, especially in your 40s and quickly approaching my 50s. Some women find that appealing. If anything, it speaks to that ruggedness that they may want in a partner. Rough around the edges, still soft spoken, but definitely not a pretty boy. Now, one of the observations I've noticed is that women will come out and say that a lot of men look soft. Not my words, their words, right? And so, too feminine looking. If that's what your vibe is, that's cool. But a lot of women are not really down with that. I find that when women look at a dude like me, they say, okay, this is a dude who looks like he could break my back. That's the vibe I get when, you know, a woman looks at me. And obviously, some women are not down for that look. I remember I was at the gym the other day, a woman saw me, a young girl saw me, she was absolutely repulsed, and that's fine. That's her preference. She was just utterly disgusted, while other times it goes in my favor. And I don't recommend picking up girls at the gym. Just, you know, keep the gym a healthy space. But this is something everyone has to deal with, you know, embracing whatever you look like, embracing your height, embracing your features, embracing your scars, embracing the things that are not conventionally attractive, and just, you know, rocking it. Find a way to rock it. If you're a shorter guy, you know, find a way to rock that in your favor. There are things that you can do. Ultimately, it's really about being happy in your own skin and living life to the fullest. Anyways, the video is getting kind of long. Chime in if you have anything to say. If you want to see more of this type of content, let me know. And yes, I'll always talk about the fitness stuff for guys who are not into the subject matter, but I'm just sort of feeling out this channel, and I kind of see what's going on out there in the real world. All right? Love you guys. Talk to you later. Bye for now.